All right. Hey, everyone. Hope everybody's doing good. I think maybe we should get going. Seems like we got a pretty full crew today. So welcome to the July call, collective call. Really stoked that everybody's on the line today. I thought what we'd do today is a little Q&A. We've had some really good presentations over the last few months and thought we'd just kind of dive into some questions. Thanks for everybody participating in the questions. But before we get going, just want to kind of give you guys an update. I was at the Upwork Future of Work conference yesterday, and really amazing conference, kind of executive conference with like 150 people there. Dyan was on stage. Great job, Dyan.
Hey, and, thanks. You too.
No, thanks. I got a chance to talk a little bit too. But what really, in the context of the group, what really got me excited was just that it feels like, as we talked about, kind of as we moved across. As this marketplace moved across the diffusion curve from 10 years ago or even 20 years ago, where those that are innovators had to throw kind of Molotov cocktails to even get noticed, and then great thought leadership in the last few years. But now it feels like we're right in the middle of kind of the chasm into early adoption, and it was really gratifying to hear lots of great conversation of companies adopting things and really being open and honest about the kind of the antibodies, that they face, but a room full of really great folks trying to move the whole open tools and open talent models forward is really gratifying. Dyan, do you have anything else to add from the conversation there?
Yeah, I think that's a great synthesis. It was really exciting to see the energy and the diversity in that room, and I think it was a really great discussion. So pretty excited. Yeah,
great. Okay, cool. Well, thanks everyone for joining. So I'll give you a little update. Let's see, on the Lish update, unfortunately Jin wasn't able to join today because he's in the middle of planning this online course. And it's going to be an online course really focused around crowd and open talent and adopting it. And so it's going to be free to all. It's going to be out next summer, but I think it's going to be really awesome in our kind of quiver of tools to help our clients kind of adopt new tools and for everybody to kind of get on the same page as far as an educational resource for especially for adoption for folks. So that's what's happening there. Jen's hard at work at that. Catherine and I are going back to Boston for a couple of days next week to spend some time with Jen and Kareem and those guys, just doing some planning. But those guys are hard at work at a lot of academic stuff. We're in the middle of writing a couple of case studies that will be really relevant to the market when they come out and we can talk about them. But if there's anything else that we could be doing in connection on the academic side of things, we'll pass it on to Jen. But just shoot me a note. Would love to help, and hear what you guys are seeing in the marketplace. All right. So let's just jump into the Q&A roundtable. I'm super psyched about this because there's so much amazing knowledge. We've got Balaji from Finkhousen who's going to jump in, who gave a talk a few weeks ago, and Dyan that was at GE Genius Link that gave a really amazing talk, and then Rich from Anadarko. That was great. I think that was last month, right? And Steve from NASA, who's on the phone as well. So what I thought I'd do is just shoot, I have a bunch of questions prepared that we've gotten from all you guys and really, really appreciate that. And I thought I'd just jump in and start asking our esteemed panel a bunch of the questions. And if anybody else has any questions that come up during the conversation, let's just, shoot them on the chat in Zoom. We can make sure we get those in the queue and get your questions answered. But if you have questions about their specific presentations or what's happened in the market or anything else that seems to be relevant, we'd love to just make this a big dialogue. All right, so here we go. So Dyan and I were just at Upwork conference, like I said, and one theme that we heard was that while there's been so much momentum in the marketplace, there are still corporate antibodies that are making adoption of open talent tools slow. To our esteemed panel, any thoughts on that? Have you guys evolved your thinking? I know, Rich, you have some really good ideas there, and Balaji, now with your new connection to the Expertfy platform, I'm sure you've been thinking about that as well.
I mean, the way I think about antibodies is this like a dinosaur-style antibody that is not letting you move an inch forward, or is this like a gnat that is constantly biting you while you're running a marathon, right? If I think that I think understanding the type of antibodies is very important because there are different solutions to each of them. If it is a monster dinosaur that is like illegal or a risk or behavior that is not helping you make any progress, then it seems like it's symptomatic of lack of alignment top down, that that you're not aligned with your leadership on the progress of this. On the other extreme, if it seems like it's more of just operational hurdles that you're facing every day because of the biggest antibody called "this is how work is done, this is how it is done in the past," that is in my mind unavoidable. I don't think there's a world that I can see where that won't happen. It's just the way you react to it is probably the biggest guidance that I've seen worked. One of the ways is make friends with them, whoever are the antibodies, understand where they're coming from. I typically use the example of our risk teams, where they are the peskiest people that don't seem to follow any logic. They overblow. They look at risks in excess proportion, and they make risks much bigger than they are. But unfortunately, that's their job. And the reason why any of our companies are large enough today is because somebody stopped somebody else from making a stupid choice. So we have to respect that and ensure that they feel that they are a part of that conversation. And typically one way in which I've done that, which has kind of worked in the past, is almost preempt their questions and be ready to answer their questions when they come up with it. So they feel like you're asking all the right questions versus skirting the questions. And once a couple of calls happen where you feel like you're as concerned about the risk to the firm as they are, they actually back off because they feel that you get it and you have the business interests in mind versus you are in love with your idea and you want to keep pushing it forward. So I think I look at it in two different ways.
That's great. I love that. I love separating the resistance and the antibodies in two different ways. How about anybody else? Rich or Steve or Dyan, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah. So I think Balaji hit it right there with the risk is a big thing that clearly upper management and the antibodies are about. And I agree that really having an answer for their concerns about intellectual property or having about security and IT security and personal security, all of those things help in kind of quashing the resistance as it comes up. I will say we're pitching a lot more of the risk of not doing anything, which is I think that we're starting to see a resonance with the idea that, especially within NASA, that we have a possibility that we're competing with other governments and industry in a way that has not been the case for a long time. And so there's a risk that we could become irrelevant. And if we don't adapt to some of the new emerging trends, then we're potentially going to be cast aside. And I think that's part of that risk story is really not just showing that using these tools and these methods are low risk, but showing that, hey, if we don't actually adapt, then there's a problem with that, and that risk actually starts to introduce some serious problems if it goes unaddressed. So.
Yeah, that's really great. That's a good way to think about it for sure. Rich, Dyan? Okay.
Rich, do you?
Sure. Yeah. I was going to make
Rich.
a comment. I think it's going to come up again later. But so I've been, we've been lucky here at Anadarko in the sense that we haven't had a lot of the C-suite resistance. In fact, it's been the opposite. So that's the luxury. But we have had those antibodies in other levels of the organization. And so one of the things that we've kind of been doing is focusing on the fact that the fact is we're trying to solve problems and the how is irrelevant to the conversation initially, because I just want to trying to let them know that there is a way to solve the problem that doesn't require the traditional means, and then kind of leaving it at that. And
And I know that when I have those conversations, and this is in line with what Balaji is saying, you have those conversations one-on-one, and you build that ally. Then it goes, it goes miles and miles.
And I would just agree with everything that's been shared and add to that if you reach out to those potential antibody kind of owners, if you will, so whether it's the risk team or the legal intellectual property team, understand and anticipate who those adversaries might be. And I found it has been very effective to reach out to them proactively and request their partnership in constructing a thoughtful and compliant and scalable program that gives them the comfort and the confidence that the risks aren't being increased unduly with the introduction of the new models.
Great. Well, thanks, guys. Those are good answers. Really great stuff. So just to recap, kind of the idea is that there's kind of two types of antibodies with dinosaurs and gnats, and especially in the gnats, that kind of risk compliance. Thinking about what happens if you don't, if you don't do it. I think that's a really good point, Steve. And then making sure those conversations happen up front and get people involved. Okay, let's go on to question number 2. What's up? Did somebody have a question? Doing that? No? Okay. So question number 2, what are some of the tips someone receiving resistance from, say, C-suite management to incorporate open talent tools? I know we've talked about it a little bit. It sounds like for a lot of you guys, you've had C-suite alignment. But any thoughts on the dinosaur antibodies? A little deeper there.
Yeah, I wish I could say we had C-suite alignment from day one, right? I mean, we did not. I think we finally come down to more C-suite alignment. In the end, what Steve said is probably the most important. It is what is the strategic reason for the C-suite to get behind it. A lot of people try and push tools or solutions to the C-suite and not how this supports their strategy, or not how this could become top 5 thing for the board to talk about. If that isn't the case, the C-suite is not really saying no. They're saying no for a couple of reasons. One, this is noise in the system. We have enough problems to solve for. I don't want to solve this. And they're saying that because they don't think this is a big enough problem or a big enough opportunity to deal with. And as such, you should understand where the C-suite resistance is coming from. Is this coming from a lot of C-suite would actually say if it is a $10 billion opportunity or a $10 billion problem or whatever is a proportional big number for you, even if it is tough, they would engage with you. If you go in and say, this feels like a $15 million problem and I need your C-suite attention, they will not engage with you. So, and you will feel that their non-participation or non-engagement is resistance. It's just that they're not prioritizing it with you. I'd actually like when somebody at a C-suite says, no, this is a bad idea, because you can actually have a conversation about why you think it is a good idea. The worst kind of resistance is just brushing you off, or just not prioritizing this, or just ignorance, or just ignoring you that this is not an important thing to talk about. So you really have to understand what do you think is resistance? Is this lack of prioritization, or is it true resistance or risks?
Great.
I would agree. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that really focus in on the C-suite management, I think it's most effective, to Balaji's point. First, start with your strategic priorities. And to Balaji's point, reach to the strategic priorities that are at the absolute highest level within your scope of responsibility and influence. So reach to those top level strategic priorities that are within your scope of reference, if you will. Secondly, I think it's really helpful to to go straight to the P&L or the cost center. So look at the financials and do a deep analysis of the financials. Once you have the framework of the priorities, if you then look at the economic impact of what you're proposing and articulate that, so the as-is economic estimate and the to-be economic estimate as a result of your talent tool recommendations, and then map a very detailed and crisp strategy and impact statement using the language that your C-suite cares about, really focusing in on the economic and strategic impact.
Great, that's good input. Cool. Okay, let's jump to question 3. How do you think about vetting gig talent? Like when you know, we think about evolving models. I mean, Balaji, you and I had a really interesting conversation the other day about about how to think about, is it contest, is it freelance? How do you think about finding the right talent for the right task?
I've been going first for all the questions. I'm going to go second this time.
Okay. Rich, do you have a thought there, or Steve?
This is Rich.
So I think this is.
Go ahead, Steve. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think this is going to be a bigger and bigger deal, and I think as crowds are coming online, the gig talent vetting machine starts actually working more effectively. I think we're going to see it kind of coming out at just the right time, because people are just starting to use gig talent, and so you can use it at the fringes without vetted crowds. But to do serious work, I think it's really important, because it's a friction point, right? It'll slow you down every time, and so if there are ways to vet either at the skill level, but also at the reliability and the confidentiality and NDA level, I think that's going to be a really valuable thing that's going to accelerate the acceptance and use of it. Go ahead, Rich.
So I was just going to say, we haven't really had a big opportunity to leverage gig talent so much. We're, as you're probably aware, we focus more on crowdsourcing, and in that sense, there's no vetting involved, because you're getting the best and the brightest just by default of the process. So we've started exploring things like Upwork, for example. And one of the things that we kind of discovered is that it is a bit overwhelming if you're not kind of guided through that, and then having to shift your way of thinking in terms of resourcing, because you don't know what you're looking for. You put in a search and you get a million hits. So in that regard, if I want to do something focused, I'm more inclined towards the curated crowd concept, where I've already vetted the talent because they've already worked on multiple projects with us in the past, and then we're creating a subset of gig talent in that regard. I mean, when I think about the Upwork piece, it was just taking us too long, so we had to kind of shift back to what we know. It's comfort level, right? Right.
That's a good point. I like that, using contests to vet the talent, the actual mechanism to find the talent. Cool. And Dyan, when we were talking to Stefan yesterday, I think one of the most interesting things, Stefan's the CEO of Upwork. He was saying that about 4/5 of his whole team, or maybe 3/4 of his whole team, are freelancers from the platform, right?
Right.
It's internal team. So I thought it was really great to see them kind of eating their own dog food and try to figure it out for themselves. So okay, cool. Well, thanks, Balaji. Anything else?
The only thing I'd add is think about 2 different use cases, right? One is I need an infographic done and I'm going to pay $500 for it use case, and the second one is I need a big data architect to come and work with me on my team for the next 3 months. Both are unfortunately in the same gig bucket, but they are 2 completely different animals. One in the first one, the infographic bucket, you have the problem of plenty, where you have, if you want a $500 infographic, you'll have 1,000 people that will swarm you saying, I can do this, and maybe 10% of them can actually do this. Unfortunately, the amount of effort that you will incur in picking the right one person, if you're not using the challenge model, is just intrinsic to the big problem in the low value freelancing space. Is the search cost in the end ends up becoming higher than the execution cost. So the platforms, I'm hoping, will solve that problem soon, because right now that's what I hear very often, that it's the costs are disproportionate. On the second side is when you have extremely high-end freelancers that you want to staff on a project, I think at that point in time, as you can see, the skew of the search cost and execution cost is very different. At that point in time, we typically recommend spend as much time as you can doing pre-vetting, create clouds in advance for skills that you can predict that you will use at scale, so that individuals who are using that high quality skill set don't have a much lower search cost. So right now, even in contingent workforce, I'm sure many of us have used it. When my team, let's say, sends out a note to my contingent workforce team to say, can you give me some candidates for this profile? We get 30 people, and then we have to interview them and then pick the one person that is. Right now, what we are bringing that down to is we get 1 or 2 people for a particular role. So we're reducing the search cost, because search cost brings friction and delays in timeline, and that's what we're trying to limit. TopTal as a platform has done one of the best jobs out there about giving you 1 candidate for a role that you request, and about 95 to 99% of the time that candidate does an awesome job. So they fix the vetting and search cost cycle extremely well.
That's great. That's a great example.
And I think that's a huge deal. I think that's a significant point to Balaji, is that the firms out there are now just starting to get better at really minimizing the friction associated with finding the talent. Like, some are really good at finding it fast, but we started with contests too, because that's a somewhat efficient way to find it when you're not sure exactly what you're looking for. But like TopTal, Paro, and others, that they're starting to use machine learning, others, to really get that friction down to get exactly what you need.
Great. Well, that's good. Thanks. That brings up a really interesting point, Steve. The whole, how will AI and machine learning start affecting the market? And I've been thinking a lot about that yesterday, over the week, just as we heard a lot of presentations at the conference. But so what are the 3 or 4 insights you've had from working in this space that you can share with us? Maybe just 2. There's so many.
I'll jump in there. Yeah, I'll jump in there. And I think that, no surprise here. I think that working in this space, really from our recent experience here, language matters. It's like Babylon. We're using a lot of terms and a lot of frames to try to educate and encourage our organizations to integrate these talent models into their core operating procedures. And it's a little bit noisy. So language matters, and the more consistent and compelling and clear we can be in the way we talk about the tools and the impact and the applications, the use cases, the easier it will be for the broader organizations to understand and get comfortable with how and where and to what effect these tools apply. So I think as we refine our language and our points of view, the adoption follow. And impact is we need to lead with impact. So we've got a lot of great examples that the tools work and the tools work well in the right applications. So we shouldn't be having the conversation about, you know, should we use these tools? We should be having the conversation to address questions like, you know, what models are best for what use cases and to what effect, and how do we build these models into our forecasts and our resourcing models. The question of do the tools work really should not be the primary question in this space at this point.
Yeah, that's great. Great insight. Anybody else can add their insights?
Yeah, this is Steve. I think one of the really interesting things that I'm seeing is kind of the overlap and intersection of the different kinds of crowd and gig work. So, you know, we started in crowdsourcing and contests, but then we're seeing gig and freelance really coming together. And what's really interesting is coming out of the contest world, like in Incentive and Topcoder and others, we were seeing passion communities that are really almost communities of practice virtually, where people are getting on to learn, to upskill, and it really wasn't about making money, although there was money to be made, and it was really about the community and creating that around a specific passion or talent. And what's interesting is to kind of see that come up against a freelance model where making money is the thing, right? And I'm really interested to see kind of how Topcoder has kind of merged those two models together. And so they're both freelancing and they're doing contests, because seeing those passion communities work really makes me think that there's some secret sauce in that, and I'm kind of curious to watch how the Upworks and the TopTals and the freelancers potentially adapt to either have possibly curated communities within that are passion communities, or if it really is kind of two different worlds that have just slight overlap.
That's interesting. It does seem, with the growth that we've all experienced over the last few years, that the marketplace is becoming way more nuanced, right? I see that every day, which is pretty interesting, right? Like both vertical categories, and the language is becoming more nuanced, and the way, you know, just the way that the tools are constructed and used. It's cool to see that. Anybody else on things that they're seeing out there? Okay. Let's see. So what's the coolest thing? Tell us the story. Anybody tell us the story of what the coolest thing you've seen happen in the last couple of years in the marketplace? I think I can leave this off. I'm really intrigued, Balaji, to see your connection with Experfy, and I think that's a big shift. I mean, you guys just announced that a couple of weeks ago, but to me, it's one of the kind of the really interesting moves in the market. You know, can you describe that or talk a little bit about that to us?
Yeah, happy to, now that it's all public out there. So we announced a significant souped up vendor relationship / alliance relationship with Experfy, which is an AI analytics data science marketplace of about 30,000 people, and we're going to use them as much as a crowdsourcing platform, but as much as also as a converting the platform into a freelancing marketplace, so that we can actually use people at scale. And again, connecting it back to why this actually happened. You know, we as a company, we're growing, at least our analytics and content dev business, are growing at about 20% year on year. There is no way we're finding talent to support that. Our biggest pool of talent in the past few years has been other countries bringing people from India, China, and other countries on visas and staffing them on US projects. Given the prevailing immigration environment, that option is slowly dying. So, you know, if you think about how professional services organizations grew in the last 10 years, first we went offshore, then we started bringing people on site to the US, and all of those pools of talent are now exhausted or are getting close to depletion. So there are two options if you want to continue scaling at the rates that we are scaling. One is significant wage inflation. We pay much higher to get people from the same talent pool to join us compared to the past. And when we ran those numbers were astronomical. And the second option is we have to unearth a new talent pool. And that talent pool, which is where Pixel has been playing for a few years, was the freelancing and crowdsourcing marketplaces. But the firm just didn't know how to do it. And when we did a bunch of investigation, it was proven that the supply exists. It is disorganized, but it does exist. Where the biggest amount of work that needs to happen is on the demand side. How do we change as a company to ensure that we are able to utilize this new talent pool, just like in the past what changes were made to ensure that we can create a monster-sized offshore capability? What were the structural changes that had to happen to make that situation true? What structural changes happened to make our global change to operate as a global entity? What were those structural changes? And we think about integrating with the freelancing trend as a similar structural change. In simple terms, I'll just give you an example. This is more an accounting question versus a Deloitte question. Let's say if I have a full-time employee that costs the firm, let's say $100 an hour, and then I put that and then sell that person to a client and then on a project, we capture not only their revenue but their cost. So we get $100 multiplied by 100 hours, so we get $10,000. Because of how accounting works, for contractors, we can only capture the difference between their cost and the revenue. So if I put a freelancer on a project similar to it, I can only count $10, which is typically the margin difference between their cost rate versus what we can bill our clients. So our project teams are like, why will I ever staff someone, even though the work is getting done, when I'm not making any revenue from that person? So there are such structural issues to, again, the same thing was if we have a contingent workforce group. If you need a contractor, you go to contingent workforce group. If you need a full-time person, you need to go to talent management. Completely distended responsibilities. So for a project team that is looking to staff people, they have to go to 4 different places to get the mix across. Again, a huge problem exists in every company. So what we did now with this deal is we said, centralized it to talent management. Talent management, you are now responsible for not only full-time employees, but also external contractors. So we're using this relationship as much as a access to talent pool. We're using this as a tinder to change how our company works, to make it more integrated with freelancers as a staffing pool that we need to go after. And one thing that I've always been raising with John is, in some way, we are demystifying the concept of this mythical being called the employee. For some reason, because they get a badge and ID from your company on day one, they are a lot more effective. They drive a lot more quality, and they're a lot more loyal to you than a contractor who's been working with you for 10 years. So we are changing that into creating a source agnostic culture that supports quality of resource, quality of content, more than the source where they came from. Unless we do that, there is no structural changes, just don't make any difference. It's as much a cultural change that has to happen to make that happen. And we're using this relationship as just a spark to make that big change.
That's great, Balaji. I mean, one of the things that comes to mind when you mentioned that is I had a really good conversation in the last couple of days with Barry Essen, who runs the staffing industry analyst group, and they're putting on a conference in September. I can get everybody the dates, but it's early September, and it's collaborating in the gig economy. There's 900 folks that go there. We're going to be running a panel there about contests and about the crowd, but I'd encourage everybody on this call to get signed up because there are lots of interesting conversations that go there, and it's exactly what Balaji's talking about. It's really trying, many companies are trying to figure this out right now, right? How do they get one talent strategy that goes across everything? So the HR community is very intrigued with this and trying to break down their own, their own bureaucracies, their own silos. And my sense is this is kind of one of the biggest issues in the marketplace that we've got to overcome to really get this, into early majority adoption. So, anybody else have any thoughts?
Hey, John, it's Ty. Can folks hear me?
Yeah. Hey, Ty. Thanks for asking some questions.
Hey, yeah. So one of the things, actually, I don't have a question yet. I have maybe a comment and hopefully a contribution. But on the coolest thing you've seen happen in this space, I'm a little bit, I honestly think that some of the stuff that Paul Estes is up to at Microsoft is super interesting. Obviously, not allowed to talk about that, I don't think, in this venue. But it made me wonder if there's a way of putting NDAs in place for this group, since it's not a massive group, so that we could share more about projects that are actually live. That may be impractical, but just putting it out there, because I think it's we're working on some things that it's just hard to share in the space. So for discussion, and then just a comment on what you and Balaji have been talking about. I totally agree with all that, and I would submit one other, maybe area for that seems to have, to me, potential for innovation in this space is the business model, because right now, one of the big differences between an employee and a gig worker is that the employee presumably is accruing value over time for participating in value creation at the company, whereas gig workers are much more transactional, and they don't build any value over time for adding value to the overall organization. And the only attempt that I've seen to actually change that is happening over in the blockchain space with a thing that I've mentioned before called Colony. And I don't know, it's essentially an open innovation platform that they're trying to build on the Ethereum blockchain. And I don't know whether Colony is going to work, but the underlying principle that if you participate in a colony on the Colony sort of platform, you earn essentially, the equivalent of equity over time in some of the projects that you're working on. And I think it would be very interesting to explore that, because I think that's probably one of the few things that's holding a lot of people back from going freelance full time, is that you don't actually wind up building value over a long career beyond just the money that you can earn based on an hourly wage.
That's a great point. No, I think that's it. I think that there's so much that needs to be done in the context of how we help. This is a big economic. It's bigger to me than a business model. It's really an economic one, right? That we rethink so many things in this new world that we're entering, in this new world of work. I mean, certainly that's one of the critical things: how you get everyone to participate in the long-term benefit of their ideas and their work. So thanks for that contribution, Ty. Really appreciate that. Yeah, and I love the idea of sharing some of the stuff that you guys are doing. And I talked to Paul this morning. He's on vacation, so he's been unable to join the call. So, but he'll be back for the next call for sure. So, but I think Ty, maybe you and I and Paul can connect on that so we can figure out how to share some of that stuff. That'd be super awesome. So, that'd be cool. Yeah, totally. All right, well, let's move on. I mean, I think that's this next question number 6 is talking about, what's one really frustrating thing that has happened for you or for your teams or for the organization space, and how did you address it? Balaji, I love that. I mean, I think that kind of hits on one thing, is that changing those bigger issues that you have that any one individual have such a hard time moving, right? How we categorize an accounting system so that we take full advantage of these new kind of innovations is a really good thing to think about in answering this question. Does anybody else have any thoughts here? Dyan, Steve, Rich, or anybody else?
I think, you know, from my perspective, you know, fresh news, right? But for me, the biggest disappointment for my team or my organization in this space is that, you know, we were really, I think, gaining momentum, and we drove a tremendous amount of impact for our organization and our clients, and just due to the broader forces that were facing the organization, we were shut down, right? We had to make the difficult decision to discontinue our operations. So for me, that was disappointing, but, you know, we'll take and basically take that experience and make sure that it's not lost. And we're working on, as some of you know, I'm working on building a business to carry forward some of that knowledge and experience into a consulting business, so that it's not lost, and it can continue to build on the case studies and the experience. But for me, that was a little bit disappointing. But
that's great, Diana. I think thanks for sharing that. I think that's hard. I mean, in my own personal experience, you know, at Avast, it was the same thing, right? You could see the future, you could touch it. You knew that what you were providing was amazing, but yet there were bigger issues at play, and that you just couldn't get there. I mean, I think that really speaks to the fact that, you know, this market it's a marathon, not a sprint. You know, one of the things that Stefan said at the wrap up yesterday of the Upwork conference is, you know, he said that there are 10,000 new people that sign up on Upwork a day, and his biggest frustration is he can't get work for everyone. So, you know, I think that's a really important thing, is that one of the things that I'm super passionate about, I think everybody here is how do we increase the demand side? How do we make it ordinary and boring and simple and useful to use these tools so that this market can grow, not only for our own businesses, but for, you know, people that really want to do the work and they're really talented out there. So that's great. Anybody else have anything to add on the frustration side of things? Okay, let's move on to the next question. So trends. Let's talk about a little bit about trends. Anybody want to talk about a couple trends they're seeing in the future in the space?
Oh, I got beeped. Can you?
We all got beeped, I think.
Yeah. This is Rich. So this may touch on a little bit of some of the previous questions, but so I won't say three trends, but one of the things that I've observed kind of anecdotally. So I had the opportunity recently to talk to about 30, 40 you know, first-year engineers and a bunch of interns here with us about what I do. And you know, as we all know, it's the crowdsourcing piece for innovation here. And what was really cool is the excitement, and what was interesting is the fact that it didn't seem like they really knew a lot about crowdsourcing and the gig economy. But the fact that I was one of the speakers, they put me at the very end, and I got probably the most questions, but because they were very interested and eager to understand. And in terms of trends, what that kind of signals to me is, we talk about some of these, you know, the dinosaurs, as we stated it earlier. The dinosaurs are going to go extinct, and the people that I spoke to the other day, they are the ones that are going to be making the decision. So in terms of where's this going to go, the fact that they're very interested and excited tells me that it's going to continue to grow, and it's going to become more ingrained in just the way that the new generation of our work society kind of embraces these things. So just an observation that I thought was pretty cool as well.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. Anybody else on trends?
Well, I'll just say I think it's both a frustration and a trend, and that is that the frustration is that the engineers coming out of college don't seem to be trained on this stuff, and so that I don't think our education system that's handing off the people that are coming into organizations, they're still not up on this stuff, which is a little unfortunate, because I think they're very much there in their culture and in their heads. They just don't know about it. And so I have seen over this last year some significant discussions starting up about education, lifelong education, how to get people going on this. Dyan, I think you shared something about Amazon and some of what they're doing, some initiatives to really kind of bring this stuff into full view. Not so much for for freelance recruitment, because I think you're right in saying that, John, that there's already so many freelancers that are entering that part of the market. The real problem is the demand side, and it's this education of organizations and getting them to shift. But just the knowledge of it is really, I'm amazed at how many times I talk about it to large groups and how few people know it even exists and see it as a technical tool in the same way they understand Uber and Airbnb. It's just interesting to me.
No, I totally agree. I think there's so much we can do as a group to continue to really push the pedal on content and, creating not only just articles and research, but also models that people can adopt things, in a much easier way. So that's great. Anybody else on trends? Balaji, Dyan?
Yeah, go ahead, Balaji.
I'll come back, please.
Okay. Just super fast. We've mentioned it before, but I am really excited about the potential convergence between human and artificial intelligence. I would offer up the value bar as an example. I think a really cool example of where you take just very organically, you are able to wire up the decisions and actions of a highly curated cohort of experts, and in real time can feed that information to peers in that community so that the entire time to drive better outcomes for their customers and their company. Business operations and kind of the human experience can really be enabled through the convergence of human and artificial intelligence, right? In these expert systems, kind of highly wired and machine learning based expert systems. So it's very much on the kind of advanced side of expert model applications, but I think it's really interesting and exciting.
That's awesome. Cool. Balaji,
Yeah. One thing that I think is going on is there's if I stratify the market into a high end, middle end to low end freelancing. One is the bottom end. I would say the leader is Fiverr, extremely successful, went IPO. The middle end is where I would put Upwork. Bottom end for me is top $25 an hour. The middle end is between about $25 to $75 to $75 an hour, which is where I put Upwork, and they're again doing extremely well. The top end is where the biggest problem is, and there is no clear leader. The top end is a lot more fractured as a marketplace, and I think that's one of the reasons why the narrative around freelancing is still more transactional and support type of activities versus strategic, high-skilled activities that actually push the core of the question as to, do you need an employee for this? Or are we looking at augmenting the current employees with freelancers to support? Or are we actually saying, can I reduce my employee count and use freelancers to some of that work? I see companies like TopTal and others are coming up, but I don't see enough other companies that have made foray into this space in the last 6 months or so to say that market is very dynamic. But I think for this market to grow and become truly a replacement in some way of full-time employees, in addition to the great job that it's already doing as augmentation of current employees, I think we need to see a little more vitality in that space.
Great, that's good. Well, I'm conscious on time, and I know we want to talk a little bit about, give the group an update on the content. But let's just jump to question number 10. So give me a prediction of where things will be in the next year, 5 years, and 10 years. Anybody want to start off there?
I'll jump in. I think that I hope that we will see much more data-driven models and technology-driven models in 5 years, 10 years. Right now, we're very fragmented, and I would say on the low end of the maturation curve. But in 5 and 10 years, I would like to see and think that we will see a lot more data amassed regarding the nature of work and the productivity of different work models, so that from that data, different decision support tools and workflow tools can help organizations optimize their operations and help the actors within those systems find more rewarding and fulfilling work and be more successful at the role that they play in those workflow systems.
That's great. That's great. Who else? How about you, Rich?
Sure. So I feel like what I would hope to see, let's just put it that way, given if we assume that there's going to be a change in the way that we execute on the things that kind of Balaji touched on earlier with regards to our resourcing systems in HR and talent acquisition, that sort of thing. I think we're going to see a shift in the talent themselves. I think we're going to see more people shifting to the model that they're comfortable with, if that's the gig work, and I think we're going to see a lot more people at younger age also entering the workplace from that perspective. And with that, I think comes that discussion that we've seen a lot with regards to how do we enable that model to become more of a viable livelihood, be it crowd or gig work. So I think we're going to see that. I don't think it's going to be this like apocalyptic job loss kind of thing where every company is purely gig. I mean, there may be companies like that, but I think we're certainly going to see that mindset shift for sure. I would love to see that.
Yeah, no, I love that. Hey, Steve, how about you?
Yeah, I would just say I think Richard's right. I think that we will see a shift in workplaces that starts to really almost have to use this, because I think that we're seeing a much faster shift of the workforce into the freelance and into the gig economy than we see the corporations moving. But I think organizations will ultimately have to, and we're starting to see the front of that. I think one exciting area that I think will really be a huge amplifier is this idea of being able to really rapidly assemble and deploy high-performing teams, and I think that's going to make this whole system kind of just get to the next level, because high-performing teams can do so much more. So I'm real interested to see that, and as well as the tools to help people within organizations partner and be part of those teams. So it's kind of an interesting time.
Yeah, definitely early days. Balaji, you want to wrap this up with your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm going to take three predictions. One is regulatory. I would say that in the next couple of years, we'll start seeing a new category of worker classification, which I call the dependent contractor, so that it minimizes the excessive amount of paperwork burden that exists on freelancers for creating LLCs, holding their own insurance, and marketplaces will start offering a bunch of those capabilities to them. So not only are they helping them match them with jobs, but they also take on a bunch of the paperwork, which is living with an independent contractor of sorts. I know it is painful to do all of that, to be a true independent contractor. And IRS will allow a role for a dependent contractor working with a marketplace, but working with the marketplaces to allow for that. The second one, as I said, it's already happening a little bit, is the source agnostic behavior, blurring lines between different sources of talent. There'll be gig workers that are internal to the company that are doing gig work for different parts of the company. There'll be people out, freelancers working on teams, employees of companies that are doing gig work with other companies. And I think it'll become a larger cloud style environment versus on-premise environment that we have with talent, just like that movement that happened with technology and data. And the last one is building on what Steve said about high functioning teams. You guys should check out this company called B12.io. They built a company based on the Stanford Flash team's work, where AI takes a bigger role in staffing projects, maintaining connectivity across different parts of the project, so you get the same consistency without having the experience, as Ty mentioned, that the more you spend time in the company, you have more context as such, you're more useful for the company. What if AI can take that role? Then what happens to the need for an employee? And that's what B12.io and Stanford Flash teams have been working on, and they are now out of beta, and what they're doing is pretty cool, and I think it's a forerunner for something bigger in the future.
That's really all good stuff. Well, thanks. It was so great to hear from our esteemed panel today. Always enjoy having these conversations, and just always blows my mind. Super honored to be in this marketplace. It feels like, even though we've all been here, many of us, for a long time, every day is a little bit more momentum. And I think that the big thing I think about is, again, like I said earlier, this is definitely a marathon and not a sprint. And I think we'll look back 10 years from now and say, wow, what a wild decade, what a wild ride. So I know we were going to try to have some time for questions from the crowd, but still, shoot me an email and we can get those questions distributed, and so hopefully have another roundtable discussion. And again, if other people want to participate, happy to have that happen. I just thought it'd be great to hear from some of our speakers over the last few months and make sure that happens. We're going to take a couple minutes, and we'll run a couple minutes over. Just want to give you a quick update on the content, and then we'll wrap up the call. Catherine's going to do the content because Jean's actually on vacation.
Great. So Jean wanted me to tell everyone she's super disappointed to be missing the call today, but just a couple of announcements. So this is super timely, but the OAQ around enterprise adoption is coming out in early August, and the next meeting for the collective at the end of August, we'll be having Adam from Top Coder and Jean to present the findings and share more about it. So that'll be great and super connected to what we all talked about today. We also have an opportunity for any of the collective members to promote the new OAQ that's coming out. I know a few of you promoted it on your own side last year, so if you're interested in doing that again this year, or if you'd like more information or want to talk about it, please reach out to me or Natalie. Overall, we've been helping to elevate enterprise positioning and visibility with a lot more content relationships with demand partners. So let us know if you are interested in us working with you on content strategy, editorial calendars, ghostwriting, that kind of thing. And then the last thing is, for the collective program, between now and the next meeting, we are starting to work on what we're calling a fellows program, and we'll be inviting individual scholars and thought leaders in the space to contribute. So if you guys have any recommendations on candidates, please also send them to any of us.
Yeah, so one of our goals, certainly of the collective, is to build into a larger organization, and I think the fellows program, to get the best thinkers in the marketplace to contribute from a content perspective, is a really, really important part of it, to not only to get them to participate in the group, but be open to answer questions and be able to push some of the things that they're thinking about doing on the marketplace to help you guys as you guys try to build your businesses. So cool. Well, I think we're 1 minute over. So thanks for your patience today, and thanks for participating. Really appreciate it. Let me know what you thought of today. It's kind of a new format, and I love these kind of Q&A things, and I hope you did too and got something out of it. But we'd love your feedback and anything else we're going to be doing for you guys. Just let us know, and really appreciate it. So thanks again, and have a good month. Enjoy the summer.
Take care, everybody.
Great stuff. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Sean.
Cheers. Bye, guys.